It was announced in the days after the British Grand Prix that unemployment in the UK had risen again to over 3.2 million and had therefore been higher than 3 million for 5 years running now. This and the outbreak of rioting in Portadown, County Armagh on the day before the race, the 12th of July holds particular historical significance in Northern Ireland, meant a rather fractious background for the wedding on the 23rd of July of the second son of the Queen, Prince Andrew, to Lady Sarah Ferguson, universally known as Fergie, at Westminster Abbey. Prince Andrew was a popular figure at the time, being an officer in the Royal Navy and having served in the Falklands War 4 years earlier as the pilot of an anti-submarine Sea King helicopter. His mother granted him the titles Duke of York, Earl of Inverness, and Baron Killyleagh, the latter as a brand new creation, as a wedding present. The Rutan Voyager aircraft, in preparation for an attempt at a non-stop round-the-world flight, set a world record of 111 hours 44 minutes for an unrefueled flight of 11,857 miles, or 18,254 kilometres, breaking the previous records for both endurance and distance set in 1931 and 1963 respectively. The Voyager's round-the-world flight took place in December 1986 and took a smidge over 9 days to fly around the world without refuelling, piloted by Dick Rutan, brother of the designer, and Gianna Yeager. In the Persian Gulf, the Iraqi Air Force resumed attacks on Iran after a 3-month layoff, hitting some military and industrial targets, but also a sugar factory and urban areas, killing over 70 civilians in the city of Arak. The Iran-Iraq War was approaching its 7th anniversary and showed no sign of ending. Meanwhile, the German Grand Prix returned to Hockenheim again and would do for the next 5 years, per FISA policy, with a couple of changes to note since the British Grand Prix, most obviously the return of Philippe Alliot, drafted in by Ligier to replace the unfortunate Jacques Lafitte, who was prognosticated to make a full recovery eventually, but whose Formula One driving career had almost certainly come to a sad end. Elsewhere, the Brabham team had abandoned their brief dalliance with last year's car, while Arrows finally had their troublesome A9 ready, with examples for both Boutsen and local boy Dana. And ATS were back, just as a sponsor though, on the side pods of the Tyrrells. Philippe Alliot had last been seen struggling round with the Ram team in 1985 and hadn't impressed many, though few would have looked good in that car. He tested for Ligier at the end of the season, but with the capture of Arnoux he was not retained and returned to driving Formula 3000 with the Oreca team. After winning the race at Spa, he was recalled by Ligier to replace the injured Lafitte. With the blue cars having a good year, this could be his chance to show what he really had. And of course there was the usual merry-go-round of rumours as silly season got into full swing, with both Mansell and Prost rumoured for Ferrari, though why either would want to leave their current team for Maranello right now wasn't specified. There were 2 solid bits of news though. Lotus would, as rumoured, be using Honda power in 1987, with Ayrton Senna signed for a further year and paired with Japanese driver Satoru Nakajima, who came as a package with the engine, leaving Johnny Dumfries looking for alternative employment, and Piquet Rosberg had announced that he would quit at the end of the season. In typical Piquet style, his announcement was both cheeky and heartfelt. As I know only too well, there has been a lot of speculation over the past weeks over the moment when I would stop driving and competing in Formula One. I have chosen this weekend to announce that I will stop driving at the end of the 1986 season. My international career started in Germany, and therefore I find it only too suitable to make this announcement today during the German Grand Prix. There are actually 2 other things which make stopping fairly easy, the current regulations and the ones suggested for next year. Another F1 farce, and I thought I'd already seen most of them. As you may have noticed, I have purposely avoided using the word retire because it is not indefinitely in my mind. I will be very active in various areas of sports promotions through the same agency which so excellently has looked after me through my active years. To my many friends in Formula One, I can say that I hope we'll be seeing a lot of each other, probably more than in the past. At the same time, I know I disappoint a few people by not disappearing completely, but that's the whole point. And of course, if Keke thought he would get away without a bit of light ribbing, he was to be disappointed. The morning of race day, a press notice appeared on Nelson Piquet's headed note paper reading, "As I know only too well, there has been a lot of speculation over the past weeks over the moment when I would stop driving and competing in Formula One. So on the occasion of the German Grand Prix, an important event for me because my Formula One career began here at Hockenheim, I would like to take this opportunity of announcing that I have decided to race in Formula One for another 8 years. In effect, I am restarting my career, having realised after 18 years in the sport that I have never enjoyed myself more. The time has come to pay tribute to all my friends and all those who have done so much for me. 2 more things have decided to make me continue. I'm impressed by the new regulations, as I am looking forward to making 32 rather than 16 starts per year. I love racing that much. Finally, despite considerable activity, I have still no idea at all about what I would do if I ever stopped racing. Piquet could certainly afford a smile. With nothing really to lose, John Barnard had apparently detuned the McLaren a bit to account for Rosberg's more robust style compared to Prost, and he had been faster by a good 2/10 over Mansell on Friday and faster still on Saturday, nearly breaking the 1:42 barrier for the long circuit and taking his first pole of the year and a career 5th. If only they'd done that earlier. Not only that, but Prost was second, to give McLaren their first front-row lockout since the 1972 Canadian Grand Prix. Behind them was Senna, then Berger in the Benetton, a hot tip to replace Rosberg at McLaren, with Piquet and Mansell languishing in a comparatively lowly 5th and 6th places, though all the top 6 were within 7/10 of Rosberg, and all over 10 seconds quicker than the previous lap record, while 7th place Patrese was nearly 1.4 seconds behind Mansell. He was joined on row 4 by Theo Fabi, with the Ferraris on row 5. Palmer was quite well up in the German Zack-Speed car in 16th, just ahead of the local driver Danner in the Arrows, and the Azellas were looking even more at sea than usual, both 5 seconds slower than anyone else and a whopping 14 seconds off pole. As the cars assembled on the grid, Jones discovered a water leak in his Haas Lola and got out, hopped over the pit wall and got in the spare, exited the pits just before they closed, and headed round to the grid while the team hurriedly wheeled the leaky one away and then got down to adjusting the car on the grid for Jonesy's settings. They hadn't quite finished by the time Rosberg led the dummy grid away, so he had to chase them round and start from the back. All 26 cars lined up though, and away they went as the green light came on. The McLarens both seemed tardy away off the line, and Senna barged through the middle, banging wheels with Prost as he surged through to take the lead, with Berger hot on his heels, then Rosberg, Piquet and Prost. But in the midfield, Johansson made contact with Alio's Ligier and slewed off sideways, catching Fabi and punting him off backwards into the sand trap. The luckless Theo was out on the spot, while Stefan and Philippe were able to head round to the pits for repairs. Rosberg and Berger swapped places off camera a couple of times, but when they came round to finish the lap, it was the Austrian, who'd been adopted as a sort of honorary German by the crowd as the best shot they had for home glory, who was ahead and stuck firmly to Senna's rear wing, but with Rosberg likewise stuck to his own. Behind them it was Piquet, Prost and Mansell in 4th through 6th, then Patrese, Alboreto, Arnoux and Dumfries making up the top 10. The cameras cut away to show Johansson in the pits, and when they returned, suddenly Rosberg was in the lead, having pulled off a fantastic move at the first chicane to overtake both Senna and Berger. He quickly started leaving the rest behind, as Senna now had a growing snake of cars behind him and seemed to be holding them up. Piquet was passed at the chicane on lap 3, having already got past Berger, and set off in pursuit of Rosberg as they all lapped Alio, who had just emerged from pits after his repairs. Prost was next to make his way past Berger and start looking for a way past Senna, while Mansell also disposed of the Austrian soon afterwards, dropping him to 6th, and soon Alboreto was also nipping at his heels. Something was clearly up with Berger's car, and on lap 5 he came in to have his engine looked at, rejoining 3 laps down. Meanwhile, Piquet had caught Rosberg, and a fine duel for the lead started, quickly decided by a move for Piquet coming into the chicane on lap 6, giving the race its 3rd leader already. Behind the leaders, Senna still led Prost, with Mansell now chased by Alboreto and Arnoux keeping station behind, just out of the points in 7th. Prost passed Senna, off-camera, while Alboreto posted yet another retirement with a transmission failure, taking some of the heat off Mansell, and Streff's camera-equipped Tyrrell blew its Renault smokily, which distracted the camera while Arnoux snuck past Mansell. Piquet had fairly motored up to Rosberg and quickly got past, but showed no signs now of disappearing into the distance as Prost caught the pair of them. And the race seemed to have finally quietened down as the field began to string out, settle in for the long haul, and wait for attrition to take its toll as it so often did at Hockenheim. Gintani retired with a slipping clutch, Alio with a dud engine, and Boutsen with a broken turbo which caught fire while the crew were taking the engine cover off. And then, after 15 laps, exactly 1/3 distance, Nelson Piquet peeled in from the lead to make the first planned pit stop. 9 seconds stationary saw him return to the track 4th behind the McLarens and Senna. A couple of laps later, Mansell followed suit with a slightly better stop and rejoined 6th, just as Dumfries retired with a leaking radiator. Piquet quickly set the fastest lap as he caught up to Senna, while the McLarens made their stops, first Rosberg, then Prost, who briefly became the race's 4th leader, then Senna, just after he was overtaken by Piquet for the lead. So by the time everyone had stopped, the order was as follows. Piquet led Rosberg, Prost, Senna, Mansell and Arnoux, the last two having an intense, mostly unseen battle, with the Ligier soon getting the upper hand. Patrese in the BT55 retired with a smoking turbo just before halfway, and things quietened down once more until the next round of pit stops, which began, again with Piquet, on lap 19. He emerged 3rd, got up to Prost and took 2nd, just as Mansell made his second stop. Rosberg had an 11-second lead over Piquet, which wasn't going to be enough to make a second stop of his own. But the McLarens showed no signs of making a second stop, so it was down to Piquet to chase Rosberg for the win over the last 12 laps. With 10 to go, the lap was 8.25 seconds. Then 5.6 the lap after that. Then 4.1. Then 2.7. Nelson was fairly screaming round, breaking the lap record, and caught Rosberg just as he was approaching to lap Warwick with 7 laps to go. By the time they were both past, Piquet was right on Rosberg's tail, and it didn't take long for him to make his move, round the outside at the first chicane. At the pace he'd caught Rosberg and the ease with which he'd got past, it looked like it was all over by the shouting, with Piquet set fair to lead the two McLarens home, with Senna a safe but distant 4th, and Mansell getting back past Arnoux for 5th. But then, with a lap to go, Senna was suddenly right behind Prost, and passed the McLaren for 3rd. Then, halfway round the lap, Rosberg suddenly pulled off, his engine spluttering. Weaving through the run-off road, sloshed a bit more fuel into his engine, and he got moving again as Piquet started zigzagging down the back straight. And now Senna in 2nd was bearing down on Piquet, scenting an unlikely victory as all 3 cars in front of him ran out of fuel. But it wasn't to be. Piquet nursed his car home to win his 120th Grand Prix, as Senna himself zigzagged across the line to hoover up those last precious drops, and Prost coasted to a halt, bouncing up and down in the cockpit to keep some momentum, as Mansell flashed gratefully past to take 3rd place and extend his championship lead over the stricken Frenchman. Prost followed Mansell's lead from Dallas 2 years earlier and hopped out to push his car down the grid, but when Arnoux also passed him, he gave up and walked away. In previous years, the McLarens had finished races with plenty of fuel when everyone else was rolling to a halt with empty tanks, and there would no doubt be questions asked in Woking when the team got back home. So, it was a Brazilian 1-2 for the first time since the 70s, with Nigel Mansell a lucky boy after a pretty indifferent race, with Arnoux 4th and Rosberg and Prost 5th and 6th by dint of being a lap up on everyone else. Prost had never actually crossed the line after passing Rosberg, so he was credited with finishing per his last completed lap. Warwick was 7th, then the Lolas of Tombe and Jones, Berger and Johansson 2 laps down after their early problems, and Alan Berg doggedly still going 4 laps down and finishing 12th and last, but finishing. So, Mansell stretched his lead over Prost to 7 points, with Piquet closing to within 4 of Senna in 3rd and getting his season back on track with a convincing win, while McLaren's self-destruct allowed Williams to make it a 26-point lead in the Constructors' table, and Ligier now had more than double the points of the catastrophic Ferrari team behind them. The next race in 2 weeks' time was another unknown quantity, the brand new Hungaroring circuit, which looked tight and twisty, good news for fuel consumption, bad news for brakes and gearboxes, and nobody knew quite what to expect from the facilities behind the Iron Curtain.